"What's wrong?" Harris said, working on the bicycle when I came back down and he saw my red eyes. "Dust. I was up in the granary." "Did you find 'em?" "What? Oh, no." Harris was still suffering from the purloined pictures in his sore business and believed that Louis had hidden the pictures somewhere in the granary. Harris felt he had proprietary rights and was hoping to find the pictures and steal them back. "I didn't see them." "He's probably got 'em under something. Did you look under things?" "No." "Well, it doesn't matter. Here, look at this. Ain't this a beauty?" He pointed to the bike with the pulley wire taped onto the rear wheel. He had reaffixed the wheel to the rear and held it up to spin it to show that it rotated freely. I nodded dubiously. It seemed more like a rotating bandage than anything else, and I couldn't see how it would possibly work. But I didn't have Harris's enthusiasm and optimism, couldn't see the big picture as well as he did. He had also manufactured a crude wooden platform which was bolted above the pedals and rusty chain guards with 2 U-bolts. For the motor. I nodded again, but in truth, I didn't think there would ever be a chance to try it. Newt and the rest didn't go into town that often. Usually somebody stayed home, but I was wrong again. The next day, Newt fired up the truck and took Claire and Glennis to town, and Louis took the team 6 miles to a neighbor's to get the horses shod. Harris watched the grain wagon trundling off down the driveway with Louis sitting up in the high seat. He had a crescent wrench hidden behind his back, and as soon as Louis was well clear of the house, he went for the washing machine. I grabbed his suspenders and stopped him. "Just so you know, I'm not taking the blame this time." "They won't even know we've done it." "You've done it." "Yeah, they won't even know. We'll hook her in and make a few runs and put the motor back on the washing machine." "Just the same, no matter what, I'm not taking the blame." He nodded. "Sure, but you'll see, there won't be no problem." Of all the understatements Harris made that summer, it was perhaps the greatest. At no time during the ensuing disaster did I think the contraption would really work. I helped him unbolt the 4 bolts that held the motor to the washing machine, and helped him carry it to the bike and put it on the platform. He had an old auger bit and brace, and a long V-belt from the granary, one of the spares for the binder. It took him just a few minutes to remove the back wheel of the bike and loop the belt through and put the wheel back on, fit the belt into the taped pulley, and then connect it to the drive pulley on the motor. He adjusted the motor into position, marked the holes, and then augered 4 holes through the wooden platform, and bolted the motor in place with the belt tight. "There," he said, "she ought to fly." Or blow up, I thought. "How are you going to start it?" The kickstarter was up against the frame. "I'll push the bike until she fires, then jump on. You be riding in back of me and climb on when I get on." "I'm not riding that thing." He studied me. "You chicken." "I'm still not riding it." He frowned. "All right. We need a timer so's we can check our speed. You run get the alarm clock from the folks' bedroom." I did as he told me. It was a brass clock with 2 bells on top and a hammer that went back and forth to ring them. "Take the other bike to the end of the driveway, and when I start the engine and you hear me let her rip, you check the clock, and then when I get to the end of the driveway, you check her again, and we'll be able to figure out how fast I went." I was skeptical. My personal feelings were that he would never get the contraption out of the yard, let alone to the end of the driveway. But Harris had surprised me before, almost continuously, and so I took the other bike and dutifully pedaled to the end of the driveway and waited. And waited. I checked the clock numerous times as I heard Harris trying to start the motor back in the yard. Puttin', 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 put, and it would die. I found later that the motor died because Harris had already unhooked the governor and it was getting too much gas and was choking out. I also decided still later that it was probably God trying to save Harris from himself. But even divine intervention didn't work, and in truth, Harris was so determined probably nothing could have saved him. Or, as Harris put it later, speaking of God, "At least he could have stopped me from unhooking that stupid governor." The motor started finally, with a stuttering puttin', 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 put, put, and as soon as I saw Harris begin to move, I looked down at the clock. I couldn't have had my eyes down for more than 3 seconds, but when I brought them up I was surprised to see that Harris had already moved toward me some distance. Several other things were happening by this time that would determine Harris's fate. The engine, starved of gasoline all its life on the washing machine by the mechanical governor, responded in explosive gratitude for the chance at freedom. It went from the subdued puttin', 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 putt to a healthy bam, bam, bam that I could hear easily from the end of the driveway. Then, too, there was the further bad luck that somehow, in some way, everything held together. Bolts, belts, the bicycle, everything miraculously stayed in one piece, and all of the gasoline that poured into the wide-open throat of the little Briggs & Stratton engine was translated into power at the back wheel. Power and speed. From that point on, everything came in flashes, flickering scenes of disaster, like watching a stop-action film of a flood or a hurricane hitting the coast of Florida. To give him his due, Harris was plucky. Early on, the Bendix brake had jammed in the chain, and their 4 pedals had turned with the back wheel. Harris kept his feet on the pedals, or tried to, but as the speed went up and the pedals began to turn faster, much faster than they'd ever turned, his legs became at first a blur. Then he held them up, the pedals slapping the bottoms of his bare feet, as the bike approached something like terminal velocity, with Harris just along for the ride. It was amazing that nothing fell apart. As he got closer, his knees up alongside his cheeks, I could see that sense had at last come into his mind, and his eyes were wide, huge with fear. His tongue hung out the side of his mouth, spit flying, and he turned into a blur. 15, 20, 30, 40. The bike had to be doing close to 50 miles an hour when he passed me standing at the end of the driveway. "Help me!" he yelled, the Doppler effect changing the pitch of his plea as he cleared the end of the driveway, flew across in front of me, and hit the ditch on the far end of the country road like a meteorite. It was then, as he put later, that he realized he was in trouble. Making the turn onto the road was clearly impossible, but he claims he still thought he could slow her down in the brush alongside the ditch. The brush slowed him all right. It stopped the bike dead in a dazzling, cartwheeling spray of engines, spokes, wheels, frames, and tangled belt. For half a second, it was impossible to tell where Harris ended and the bicycle began. The whole seemed a jumbled mass of boy and machine. Then Harris separated, his body high above the brush, spread-eagled. He claimed later he could see for miles, still moving close to 50 miles an hour, then fell down in a curving arc to hit the ground and explode in a flurry of willows, leaves, brush, and dirt. Then silence, broken only by the soft hissing of gas running from the tank onto the engine and the ticking of the brass alarm clock. "Harris?" Nothing. "Harris? Are you all right?" A spitting sound, leaves and dirt being expelled, then a grunt. "Hell no, I ain't all right. I was stuck in the dirt like an arrow, and I'm all over scratches." "Do you need help?" I couldn't see him for the brush and willows. "Yeah. Help me find my bibs." "Your pants?" "Yeah. They come off me somewhere." We looked for half an hour and more, Harris hiding twice when cars went by on the road, and we didn't find them, and we looked for another half hour and we still didn't find them, and we never did. We finally gave up. The bike was a total loss, though the engine was cast iron and undamaged, and we put it on the seat of my bike and held it there while we wheeled it back to the yard and the washing machine, Harris walking alongside, naked as a bird and all over scratches, as he'd said. Later that night, we were lying in our beds in the dark, night birds singing outside the window, and Harris whispered, "How fast was I going?" I shook my head, then realized he couldn't see me in the dark. "I don't know." "What did the clock say?" "I forgot to look at it." "You forgot?" "I'm sorry. I go through this and have to tell Pa I lost my pants somewhere, and you forgot to look at the clock?" I said I'm sorry. There was a long quiet. "Well, how fast do you think I was going?" I thought long before answering, remembered his eyes, his legs pumping, the motor pounding as he went by, the crash in the brushy ditch, the sight of him flying through the air, losing his pants. At least 100. Another soft silence, then a sigh. "I thought so. The fence post looked like chicken netting. It was really something." Yes, it was really something.